Hello, everybody. Welcome to another webinar session this lovely afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. Our chat function is open as always, and we would love to know where we are broadcasting to. It's always nice to put a place to the many lovely names we see. Gonna wait a few more minutes for people to join in before we start. Hi, Tamlin from Cape Town. Okay, I can see quite a number of people are in the room already, but I don't know where you're joining us from. Hi, Shelley from Kenya. Leon from Cape Town. Interesting. Dates from Cape Town. Darcy from Brazil. Charlie from London. Tanga from Cape Town. We've got lots of Cape Town in the house today. Yesterday was more of Kenya. Michaela from New York. Great. That's quite a global audience already. Clive from Durban. Thank you all for joining us today. I think we're good to start now while others join us. Today we're looking at selling wildlife, why visitor interactions don't make business sense. And one of the most common challenge in tourism business today is clients requesting for wildlife activities that do not align with ethical practices like cub petting or elephant rides. So today we'll be discussing why these interactions harm both animals and business reputation and explore sustainable alternatives grounded in the latest welfare research and industry guidelines. Just our usual housekeeping before we start. The webinar will be recorded and a copy of the recording will be shared shortly after the live session. So if you miss out on anything during the presentation, be sure to be able to catch up with that from the recording. Also, if you have any question for the presenter, while the presentation is going on, just pop that into the Q&A box on just at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have some time to take all those questions after the presentation. Taking us through today, we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Louise DeWall. Louise is the Managing Director of Blood Lions, a non-profit dedicated to ending the commercial breeding, keeping, and trading of captive lions and other predators in South Africa. Through advocacy, research, and lobbying, she's led efforts to increase awareness of the captive lion industry and push for policy reform, including serving on the 2023 Ministerial Task Team for Industry Exit Strategies. Louise has got a PhD in environmental management and over a decade of experience in responsible tourism. And she brings with her deep expertise in sustainable wildlife practices and a unique understanding of the challenges tourism businesses face when balancing ethics and client demands. Thank you for joining us today, Louise. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Blessing. And yeah, it always sounds so good, doesn't it? It's when somebody reads out your bio. Thank you. And it's wonderful to see so many different people from across the globe and lots of people from Cape Town. So do a little wave because I'm quite close to Cape Town. Yeah, I want to take you through some of the reasons why wildlife visitor interactions don't make business sense. Before we start there, just want to be sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what wildlife visitor interactions are. And these are generally physical interactions between captive wildlife and visitors or volunteers. And in can include things like cup petting, walking with or riding captive wildlife, using them as photo props, or even feeding captive wildlife. The reasons why will hopefully become clear during the presentation, otherwise I am not doing my job properly. So first of all, setting the scene, animal sentience, what is that? It's the ability of animals to feel and experience emotions like joy, pleasure, pain, fear. There are still ongoing debates on exactly what organisms could be considered sentient, but most scientists agree that this includes all mammals. There is a global consensus that animals' capacity to feel both positive and negative states underpins animal welfare. So animal sentience and welfare are connected. And that is regardless of whether an animal is wild or domesticated. So to recognize animal sentience, it has created a radical shift in the way that we view the moral status of animals and how we provide for and ensure their welfare and well-being. Although there is no formal recognition of animal sentience in South Africa, as far back as 2008, South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal recognized animals as sentient beings that are capable of suffering and of experiencing pain. This was then followed in 2016 by a constitutional court judgment that made a groundbreaking statement. It says the rationale behind protecting animal welfare has shifted from merely safeguarding the moral status of humans to placing intrinsic value on animals as individuals. This is an important statement for all tourism activities involving animals and wildlife, whether in captivity or free roaming, as it shifts the interest from a human-orientated to animals' interests. And for the purpose of this presentation, I want to focus on captive wildlife in tourism facilities. So when we look at where we are in South Africa in 2019, the Southern African Tourism Services Association, SATSA, created guidelines and a decision-making tool around an ethical framework with an African approach, which recognizes the importance of Ubuntu and the relationship between animals, the environment in which they live, and their connection to us as humans. The guidelines state that the interest of animals should not be subordinate to the benefits humans derive from their existence, meaning if captive wildlife facilities clearly prioritizes human interests, which can be financial, gratification, entertainment, information, over an animal's well-being, it can be considered as unethical. So they drew in 2019 a firm line in the sand and concerning captive wildlife attractions in South Africa's tourism space. And they identified clear activities involving captive wildlife that you should avoid, support, or support with caution. So what kind of captive wildlife tourism activities would you consider unethical or unacceptable? For example, cup petting, elephant back riding, but where would elephant feeding fall? Is that a grey area for you? These are all questions that are often not easy to answer because we bring in our personal opinion into these debates. So with the SATSA guidelines and the tool, they make these decisions so much easier and more objective. And their industry-wide guidelines are extremely helpful for you as a business to identify those activities that are unacceptable and to be avoided, and those that you do want to support. So let's have a look at the type of activities to be avoided and why. So the first one is tactile interactions with infant wildlife. So if you're given the opportunity to touch, hold, feed, play with baby wild animals in any shape or form, the activity is unethical according to the SATSA guidelines and should be avoided. So why? What are the reasons for this? So first of all, in order to tame a baby, for example, cuppetting or future interactions, the infants need to be removed from their mothers within days to weeks of birth, which is obviously very extremely worrying. The animals are forced to exhibit unnatural behavior. They don't have a freedom of choice and can often not escape from visitors. And it serves no educational value. We as bloodlions have often experienced that facilities give out incorrect information during such activities. And in addition, it serves no conservation value, as these animals will never be reintroduced into the wilds. For lions like for animals like lions, captive breeding is also currently not a conservation tool. So if we look at the health and welfare concerns, the consequences might not be immediately apparent. For example, if we remove an infant animal from their mother prematurely, it's obviously extremely stressful and it's unnatural for both the mother and the infant, and it can lead to long-term health issues. So these cubs are hand-raised and bottle-fed, so they're missing the nutrients and immunity from the mother's milk. And even the best milk replacers cannot provide for all the necessary nutrients and vitamins. And that can lead to immune deficiencies and disease. If we look at the cup on the right, only a few weeks old, you can already see the bone deformities, the rounded front legs, and that is as a result of nutrient deficiencies. Furthermore, these cubs work hard, often 8 to 10 hours per day, 7 days a week. And it's always during a time of day that they should actually be resting, which is daytime. They're handled continuously by both the public and often untrained animal caretakers. And when we look at the social structure, look at the picture on the right, very common. When you see that all the cubs are the same age, there's no adults in the picture, and often lions and tigers are housed together, species that don't even live on the same continents. So to summarize, it's never in the animal's best interest to remove an infant from its mother for human gratification. That's the simple bottom line. So another group is performing animals, and that needs to be avoided. So performing animals do not only appear in a circus. A cheetah used as a photo prop is a performing animal. Most tactile interactions involve some level of performing. So performing animals could include elephants, predators, primates, dolphins, whales, birds, reptiles, a whole range of animal species. And the reasons to avoid performing animals is, again, there is hands-on involvement and often cruel training involved, not just handling, but cruel training. The animal does not have a freedom of choice again. It's forced to exhibit an unnatural behaving, again, no educational value and no conservation value. So to me, the main concern is the welfare concern. To perform in a public show or a display, the animals need to be tamed or habituated, and it means that most likely they were, again, removed from the mother prematurely, often already being used for cup petting, and they would have to go through some form of training based on a system of dominance, that is maintained through very delicate balance of fear and reward, and often involved corporal punishment, tethering, and/or food deprivation. So, for example, elephants have to go through a very cruel process of breaking their spirits that often leads to physical and physiological injuries, regardless of whether the animal is used for riding, feeding, touching, painting, or any other unnatural activity. Predators also receive some form of training, and cheetahs, often used for walking and photo prop activities, are on leashes, are offered pieces of meat during the show to keep them rewarded. So there's always some kind of training involved that continues. Adult lions are generally not used in direct contact because they're too dangerous, but I will come back to the safety aspects a little bit later. So the third group of tactile interactions with predators and cetaceans, they follow a very similar pattern to the previous activities. There's training and handling techniques involved, frequently using harmful ways of training, and these kind of activities are just not in the best interest of the animal. It's unnatural, unethical for predators and cetaceans to interact with humans, and these activities can be extremely stressful for the animals. The same really with walking with predators or elephants. That's the fourth group that should be avoided. Again, training and handling involved, unnatural behavior. It leaves them no freedom of choice. And again, no educational or conservation value. And I think what we need to realize, and especially for you as a business, in addition, wild animals can be unpredictable and dangerous, and they can inflict serious injury to humans, especially during stressful and unnatural activities that puts them in very close proximity to humans. So a study of all known predator attacks that were reported in the media were analyzed and showed that there were 52 big cat attacks involving 58 people. However, we need to realize that probably many more will have happened, but had gone unreported. So in these attacks, there were 40 lions involved, 14 cheetahs, and 4 tigers. And of the 58 people attacked, 14 were children, and 3 kids and 18 adults died as the result of the attack. So it's not just injuries. And interestingly, you don't necessarily need to be inside an enclosure to be attacked either. Because 9 people were actually attacked through a fence with 1 fatal injury as well. So then the 5th group is the riding of wild animals. And I'm sure that most tour operators have really started to steer away from this activity for good reasons. Again, it hits all the previous issues, but in addition, there are serious health and welfare concerns riding wild animals. So if we look, for example, in most cases, the animal again would need to be trained to accept humans on their back. These training techniques frequently involve, again, negative reinforcement and cruel methods that can be very harmful to the animal. And even though animals like an elephant are very strong, their anatomy is actually not designed to carry weight on their backs. And that can cause them pain and injury to their spines. And something to recognize as well is, for example, elephants eat for a very large part of the day and even during the night, and foraging time is seriously interrupted by these kind of entertainment programs. Another group to keep in mind and one that isn't so obvious from the SATSA guidelines are the voluntourism opportunities. Voluntourism obviously attracts the paying international volunteers to work at these captive wildlife facilities, and placements are often advertised under the guise of conservation or wildlife rehabilitation, whereas in reality they involve captive bred animals that will never experience a truly wild life. Concerns have been raised around the deceitful messaging and the exploitation of young and vulnerable tourists. And not only are the marketing messages false, these projects can divert vital funding from genuine conservation efforts. So something else that you want to be aware of. So let's recap. What do these activities all have in common? Wild animals in captive situations that display unnatural behavior and have no freedom of choice. They have no educational value. Many of the facilities offer little to no educational information, sometimes even incorrect, as I said earlier. And they have no conservation value. When we look at the lions and the tigers in the picture, they're not to be released in the wilds. And currently in South Africa, there is no conservation need to breed lions in captivity. We have plenty of wild lions. So we need to acknowledge that by supporting, for example, lion cub petting, that we're condoning the follow-up activities that are part of their life cycle, such as cant hunting practices and the trade in live lions, their bones, their parts, and their derivatives. So as a tourism business, you need to stop putting human interests over the animals' interests. In addition, I think what's important too, that internationally, there's a rapidly evolving landscape of changing EU and global sustainability legislation that are aiming for more transparency, less greenwashing, and providing measurable progress in achieving green goals. So even though these developments are very EU-centric, we need to recognize that they will have a direct impact on the African tourism supply chain. And ATTA has done a webinar on green claims, how to prepare for anti-greenwashing EU legislation, and the link is in the little QR code on the slides. In South Africa, the global awareness campaigns and documentaries such as Blood Lions, political and social pressure indicate that captive breeding and commercial use of lions and other wild animal species does no longer have the required social license to operate. After a parliamentary colloquium, a high-level panel process, Minister Barbara Creecy announced in May 2021 that the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment would adopt a majority high-level panel recommendations pertaining captive lions. In short, these recommendations state that South Africa would close the captive lion industry, which is a groundbreaking announcement in South Africa. I have to be very quick here to say that that hasn't happened yet. But they, apart from all the ethical and the welfare, animal welfare reasons that I've gone through, these political changes are also further reason for you as a business to rethink selling unethical captive wildlife activities and try to keep it wild. And for support on what activities or facilities rather to support and which to avoid, you can check out wildchoices.org. Again, their link is in the QR code on the slide. Wild Choices use the SATSA guidelines and decision-making tool to assess all the captive wildlife tourism facilities in South Africa. So they've done a lot of hard work for you. And lastly, I'd like to encourage you to actually take it one step further and sign our Born to Live Wild pledge. And you would add your business to more than 215 operators that have already committed to not knowingly support any activity that contributes to the cycle of captive breeding, count hunting, and commercial exploitation of wild animals. Thank you very much. I know it was very quick. It was a snapshot overview, but I hope I've just about managed to keep it 20 minutes. So we've got time for the Q&A rather as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Louise. Thank you for that eye-opening webinar. That was quite interesting to know. We now have some time for Q&A. So if you have any question for Louise, just pop that into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We have a question here from Colin. Samara Karoo Reserve in the Eastern Cape offer guests close viewing of their cheetahs. What is your view on this?
I think, Colin, it's always important to think about where does the balance of interest lie? Does it lie on the human interest or the animals? Are the animals completely free to make their own choices? They're not being forced into any kind of activity, being in a particular place. You know, those are the kind of elements that you need to consider. If it is that the animals have a complete freedom of choice, they're wild, they're not in captivity, they're not under human control, then generally speaking, that activity can be supported with caution. But again, I would encourage you to look at the decision-making tool and see when you go through it where you end up. Do you end up in avoid? Do you end up in support? Or are you ending up in the middle, support with caution?
Great, thank you. As a tour operator, aside from not sending clients to places that offer wild interactions, what else could we be doing to support efforts to stop these places existing altogether in a sustainable way?
I think that's a really good question as well. Obviously, not offering those kind of activities as a tour operator is the first really important step. Secondly, it's talking to people, raising awareness, because there's still a lot of ignorance around these topics amongst people. So I think raising awareness and educating people on the whys, not just saying you can't do this, but explain to people why that is. Talk to friends, colleagues, peers, ask clients to talk to their family, friends, peers, and it snowballs. And I think raising awareness is such an important part of getting the message out there.
Thank you. What are the proposed exit pathways for the captive lion industry? As the South African government approved them, and how long will it take to phase this abusive industry out of business?
Good question. So the ministerial task team on voluntary exit, they submitted their final report in January, February this year to the minister. The report and the recommendations were approved by cabinets. There are a limited number of exit options because there is just a limited amount of things that you can do. I think the time isn't really here to go into every single exit options, but two prerequisites, mandatory prerequisites were identified and 6 viable exit options. How long it's going to take? How long is a piece of string? But I think considering how long it's already taken so far to get to where we are at the moment, I think we're looking at least at 5 to 10 years to close the industry.
Okay. Is a habituated animal on a safari reserve truly wild?
Sorry, I didn't catch the first bit.
Habituated animal on a safari reserve truly wild?
Yes, it's a good question because that is a little bit of a gray area. I think we need to realize that South Africa's got a lot of fenced reserves. The animals are free roaming. The animals are self-sustaining. The ecological processes apply, although there is some management involved on those reserves. So are they truly wild? It depends on what the definition of wild is. Yes, they're free roaming. Yes, they are self-sustaining ecological processes and apply. However, as you say, there are some form of habituation. There is a form of management. A lot of exchange goes on between fenced reserves to make sure that genetic material gets exchanged and no inbreeding takes place. So yes, there is management in management. There has to be. So I think they're wilds, but there is that element of management, definitely. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
A question from Clive. Would Dr. DeWaal endorse a proposal for lion safe haven meets the MTT recommendations?
Yes, look, in an ideal world, I would not like to see predators, apex predators in captivity, because it's extremely difficult to really meet all their welfare needs. In captivity, predominantly and most importantly, we can't allow them to hunt, and predators by its own right, they are hunters, so they cannot lead a natural life. So in an ideal world, I would not like to see predators in captivity. However, if we do that to the best of our abilities and we try to give them the best enclosures, the best enrichment, that the best care, that we don't breed, we don't interact, we don't trade with the animals, we leave them pretty much to their own devices. I don't have a problem with it. And I think we have to in South Africa. We have to do something with a percentage of the lions that will come out of this process.
Great. Is there a list available online with details about activities, attractions, and so-called sanctuaries that should be avoided? Awareness is key, and I've been able to properly explain to clients why we do not offer certain activities and sanctuaries. However, I can imagine it may be helpful for some travel agents / tour operators to also have access to a document with arguments and explanation that they can use to educate clients.
So, as I said in the presentation, Wild Choices have done this work in terms of all the captive tourism facilities or captive wildlife tourism facilities in South Africa. So that list is publicly available. That will tell you who to support. And I think all the reasons, the whys behind that are really in this webinar. So hopefully that will have been answered as a result of the presentation. But yeah, please go to the wildchoices.org website. They've done a lot of hard work for everybody in terms of South Africa, and hopefully, you know, they will be able to take it further afield as well.
Okay. Highlighting in some more detail, yeah, your alignment with such wild animal welfare and behavior sustainability guidelines, whether those from the GSTC, which I helped to include years ago, or elsewhere, would be of interest.
I think there are quite a lot of different guidelines available globally, which makes it quite complicated in a way, because I know that ATTA have released guidelines. The ANVR in Holland have. There are the Global Sustainability Council. They've done stuff. I know that Fair Trade Tourism in South Africa have. So there's lots of different guidelines available. I think from maybe I'm biased, because it's South African, but I feel that the SATSA guidelines are so user-friendly because you don't need a lot of welfare knowledge. It is quite easy with the decision-making tool to go through that step-by-step process to identify would a facility be acceptable to use or not. So that is, I think, the very good and positive thing about the SATSA guidelines, that I find them very, very user-friendly.
Okay. What is your thoughts about volunteer work where there is no physical interaction with the animals?
I think, look, I'm not, wasn't, if that came across and it was wrong, I'm not saying any volunteerism work with captive animals is unacceptable. Definitely, volunteers should never be interacting with wildlife. They're not trained. They're not trained in animal husbandry, in caretaking. They haven't got any welfare training. So as long as volunteers are not used for that hands-on part of animal caretaking, there's not a problem. And I know that a lot of good sanctuaries do use volunteers for other things. You know, they help cleaning, they help with clearing vegetation, they help with fire prevention, they help with making and creating enrichment material for the animals. So volunteers can do a lot of different things if they're not involved with the hands-on part of animal caretaking.
Great. Darcy is saying, please share a link to those SATSA guidelines. I think it was already shared during the presentation, the QR code, right?
Yes, there is the QR code, and also the information I provided you, Blessing, for the post webinar.
Yeah.
That has all three links in to the SATSA guidelines, to the decision-making tool, and also to frequently asked question documents. So yeah, that information will be sent out by Blessing post webinar.
Great. All right, then. I think with that, we've come to the end of the webinar today. Thank you all for being here today and for diving into this very crucial topic with us. And we hope you're leaving with fresh perspectives and, you know, better ways to make ethical choices around wildlife.
Exactly.
A huge thank you to Dr. Lewis, It's really a pleasure to gain your insight on this matter and for your commitment to responsible tourism. We do hope to see you all next time during our next webinar. Just keep an eye out on ATTA emails. And of course, a copy of the recording of this one will be shared with you soon. So in case you miss out on anything during the presentation, like the links and useful resources, you can always catch up on those from the recording. Thank you all once again and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you all so much as well. And thank you, Blessing, for having us.
Cheers.